And we are about to welcome our last speaker on this stage, who will share some of his knowledge about building and maybe even breaking the CI/CD pipelines. Please welcome Zan Markan.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I mean, I've never done one in a tent before. I should have learned to juggle, but I'm sure you've not heard this one before. So, anyway, today we'll be talking about travel and also CI/CD and why I think they are quite similar. But before we begin, let's start with the horror story, because why not? So this one is about me being stranded in Iceland in the middle of January 2020. It's a travel horror story from 2020 that hasn't anything to do with COVID, which is pretty rare, I have to say. Anyway, I live in London, and I was going to Boston for a work thing, and for reasons, I decided not to take one of the 10, 12 daily flights that go direct between the two cities. I decided to hop via Iceland, via the Keflavik airport, and have a connection there. I land there, everything's smooth, on time, perfect. I have some nice food, some nice wine waiting for my connection flight, and it was snowing. I mean, January in Iceland, I'm expecting some cold snow to happen. That's probably why it's called that, the way it's called. Anyway, it keeps snowing, and my flight keeps getting delayed. First half an hour, then 1 hour, then 2 hours, 3. Was supposed to fly at about, I think, 3:30, 4, and I think at about 7 they basically said, yeah, your flight is cancelled, sorry. To me and to 1,000 other people who were also stranded, probably more than 1,000 to be honest. So yeah, we were all stranded in this airport, which is heaving by the time. Everyone's trying to figure out what to do. We're trying to book hotels in Reykjavik, the city. They're all booked. And even if we could get a hotel in that city, we couldn't, because the road between the airport to the city, the capital city, was snowed in. And snowed in by Icelandic standards means snowed in. Anyway, we ended up spending the night in a makeshift, almost like a tent. It was a sports hall, but this brings back some memories, run by the local Red Cross chapter. But I mean, the end of the story is I managed to get my connection flight the next day, less than 24 hours later than my scheduled flight. I was able to get to my destination, despite this being the worst travel disruption to Icelandic air travel since 2020 volcano I cannot pronounce. It's like, I mean, Icelandic and Hungarian, they're unpronounceable to me. But that's the volcano I'm talking about. You might have remembered it. And it was like the worst travel experience ever. But still, I got home safely. Why this is relevant will be revealed in a minute. So, my name is Zan Markan, and when I'm not stranded somewhere, I work as a developer advocate at CircleCI. We are a CI/CD platform, hence this talk is about CI/CD as well. One of the things that I do is I get to talk to teams from all over the world, working in companies of all sizes, different industries, about what kind of challenges they're solving with their CI/CD setups, the platforms that they're building for their developers, and learning what kind of patterns we observe from there. So that's where this talk kind of started off. But again, going back to travel, I like to compare travel guides to your run-of-the-mill coding tutorials. You know, the ones that are like, learn CI/CD with Python, and it's basically a hello world application that installs 2 dependencies, runs a test, and That's it. You know how to do CI/CD for Python. I'm sure everyone does it by now. The reality is, it's not like that, and the same is with travel guides. It's very surface level. They're going to tell you like what the top sites are for some city. For example, for Budapest, okay, I have to go walk down Danube, and I have to go to both sides of the river, see the parliament, and a couple of churches, I presume. Go to the railway museum, which is awesome. But yeah, there's a lot for. It tries to kind of capture the interests of way too many people to be relevant in a significant manner to any one of you. And that's especially the case if you travel for work, because obviously that's when you're not really sightseeing, you're just kind of doing your in and out as effectively as possible. That's one of the problems, anyway. But again, what does travel have to do with CI/CD? So, when you travel, a lot of the things, apart from being somewhere and enjoying the local cuisine, the local sites, are very much repeatable. You have to get on a plane, so you need your documents, you need your boarding pass, you need to check in, you need to take your laptop out, your toiletries in a plastic bag, get in a metal tube for 2 hours, maybe 5 hours, maybe 10 hours, depending on where you're going. Then you get to your destination, then you try to tell the cab driver or Uber driver or whatever the destination of your hotel, and then you decide you can't really pronounce that name, so you just show them your phone, okay, they get you to your destination, then you can find something to eat, and all of that. It's like pretty much the same for everywhere you go. You have to keep to a schedule, and that's what your software does every time you build it. That's what I'm trying to get at. Anyway, and with every single thing you're doing, you try to apply more automation to do all of these things with less mistakes, more reliably, and ultimately better. Apply this to an whole organization. You have dozens of teams, maybe hundreds of teams, trying to do the same things for their projects, whatever they are building, they are testing, they are orchestrating, they are deploying. So you kind of start seeing these infrastructure, DevOps, platform engineering organization emerge and be created to help those teams, those kind of application development teams, do their jobs. And the way they do it, they establish a common set of guidelines, tools, platforms to help you do that. And in turn, they modularize the whole kind of CI/CD building experience. So you want to start a new project, new service, here's the building blocks you can use so you don't spend your time reinventing the wheel. Speaking of modularization, this is a kiosk. I'm originally from Slovenia, so next door practically. So this is a kiosk. It was designed by a Slovenian designer in 1968, and they were immensely popular all over Yugoslavia. I remember buying like snacks and comic books in these. They were pretty much everywhere. You went to a circus, you bought your tickets in one of those. And you could stack them together, and basically you can make a restaurant out of it. You can have a kiosk for just newspapers or whatever. They're really cool. And this particular one was actually taken, this photo was taken in New York, of all places, in the Museum of Modern Art, because they are just nice and cool like that. Anyway, travel, again. So all of these things, you want to have this reproducibility, you want to have this kind of center of excellence that helps you achieve common things more effectively. And that's what my talk is all about. I work for CircleCI, so I'm going to be showing you some code samples. They are going to use CircleCI, but the patterns I'm talking about are pretty much universal. They're pretty much universal. And what does this have to do with travel? If you have your kind of best practices developed, if you have your center of excellence for something like software delivery, you can resolve an incident, an outage, in a kind of manageable amount of time. The same as the whole travel industry can shut down a whole major international air travel hub and reopen it and get everyone who missed their flights to their destination in 24 hours. I think that's wild. I think that's remarkable. And that's what we need to aim for. Anyway, travel. What travel guides tell you is to check out the main roads. There is one in Budapest that I had it written down, but I forgot its name. There is one in Barcelona, it's called La Rambla. There is one in London, it's called Oxford Street. Every city has one. It's a main kind of shopping district. That's where all the tourists go, and none of the locals, because everyone knows that it's full of chains, and it's not really somewhere you kind of want to go unless you're just there for a few hours to kill the time. What you do instead is you walk on the back streets where the actual kind of city life happens. Maybe that's 1 or 2 streets away, maybe that's a whole district away, it doesn't matter, but you will find better restaurants, you'll find better shops, you'll find the real kind of destination. That's what I like to do. And when you are trying to build your pipelines, build your CI/CD integrations, you don't want to just run your tests on a commit, maybe deploy something. You might want to do something more. For that, you need to expand your integration, and obviously I'm talking about integrating something with an API. Every single CI/CD platform will have APIs, and they will allow you to sidestep the limitations of dashboards, of UIs, of just the regular build, test, deploy, commit, build, test, deploy flow. Because you want to get more out of it so that you can be more productive, your teams can be more productive. It allows for, advanced orchestration, integrations, and pretty much anything that's available. For example, in CircleCI, like anything that's available in the dashboard is available through the API. So you can imagine what the possibilities are. And pretty much all the patterns that I'm talking about today have this in common. You have to do something else. You need to reorchestrate something manually in order to build something on top of this platform. It also allows you to decouple pipelines from just this kind of commit flow. So it's not only CI/CD anymore. It's pulling data maybe from an observability tool. Maybe it's building your applications based on a chatbot command. Like if you have a testing team that wants to get the latest build for a particular platform, for example, mobile is kind of takes a bit longer to build sometimes, you can have a chatbot command to do that for you. And the way you orchestrate this, the way you build this is hit the APIs. I'm going to show you a demo of that a bit later. But yeah, that's what we're talking about. And yeah, with CircleCI in particular, you can pass parameters, you can do all sorts of stuff to really change the actual flow. Embrace the public transit. I really love it, the fact that we're in this railroad museum, because it's public transit, and public transit is awesome because without it, we'd all be still waiting in traffic somewhere, trying to get here or somewhere else by car. As if you're thinking about it, if you're a small city, doesn't have much public transport, sure, you can get around. But if you have hundreds of thousands, millions of people, unless you're like willing to sit in a gridlock for a long time, you will want to get out of personal cars and into public transit. The software delivery kind of analogy I'm talking about here is infrastructure provisioning. If you have your application teams, or maybe service teams, you're building your services in a small startup, everyone can own whatever. That's perfect, that's fine. But if you have 10 teams, chances are you're going to be duplicating a lot of things. You have 20 teams, you're going to be duplicating even more things. And for that, you want to start thinking about centralizing certain things, and so that you limit costs, centralize the expertise, and start getting more out of it. I have an example here where I'm basically, I've got a central repository that's kind of owned by this platform team that allows you to provision AWS IAM roles that you can use with OpenID Connect tokens. So they're specific to each individual project. Each individual project has their own permissions. They need to do whatever they need to do, but you limit those things. And if you think about it, one side you have development team managing everything by themselves. They manage their own permissions, they manage their own infrastructure, but they aren't necessarily experts on it, so they might introduce security risks, they might introduce inefficiencies. On the other hand, in a large enterprise, more like legacy-oriented, you might think about, okay, we're just going to centralize everything. You're going to send us a document, and we're going to do whatever we're going to do. And 3 weeks later, you're going to get an environment. That's how we're doing things. It's going to be perfect. As a developer, you don't probably want to sit around for three weeks or 3 months. You want something in the middle. And here, what I'm proposing is essentially this central repository that anyone can create a pull request for. And they basically, you want to spin up a new service, you create a new project, and we will just provision whatever you want. So I have this OIDC role provisioning thing, where I'm basically just provisioning new roles for each individual project. So CI/CD pipeline is essentially, CircleCI uses YAML, so hopefully this is readable to everyone. I can make it a little bit bigger. I'm using Terraform to provision everything. And there's just one job to plan everything and another job to actually do the Terraform apply, to actually run it. And the scripts are all kind of in here. And ultimately, what each individual kind of application team, when they want to create when they have new requirements, they just need to create a new project in here out of a template. And again, this could be automated as well, out of a template. Hey, this is create a new project in GitHub, create a new project, run it in CircleCI, set it up. You have your IDs, you have everything, and you basically just write your policies that you want in here in standard AWS's configuration syntax, and then open up a pull request. And open up a pull request, that obviously repository is controlled by a central kind of platform team who basically says, okay, are you following all the secure guidelines? Are you sure you need all of these resources? But ultimately, they don't have to provision everything for you. They just need to approve. And that's when you kind of streamline the whole flow, make it a lot more self-service, which seems to be the trend more and more. In my case, I'm only creating one resource, which is a container registry, so that my kind of consumer project can then take this and use it. But ultimately, what I'm doing is I'm doing this, and in CircleCI, I'm basically passing this role identifier as an environment variable to this project. And one important thing here is, you need to follow the strict naming convention. You need to agree, okay, this is how my projects are named, how my teams are named, everything is encoded in a name so that, your resources are easily distinguishable. And then where you're looking at something like that, for example, my plan infrastructure job will just show you, okay, I'm changing this here, these are the changes, oh, okay, we're happy with this. or we're not happy with this. They can just review everything, and it's a lot easier. So yeah, developer teams, they write their own policies, they can do things. You can do the same thing for infrastructure, you can do the same thing for other things, but that's the kind of idea. You centralize some things, but still giving developers, application developers, the permission to do everything. All trips needs to end. That's a very common thing. Like, you go somewhere, you come back, maybe, or you'll travel on. I don't know. But usually, yeah. In my case, I tend to come back in a few days, and why not do that, the same thing for your development or testing or other environments. So gone are the days when we had stage, dev, prod, stage 2, stage 3, whatever it is. You could create your environments, and we've been doing it like in web. We've been doing it with Heroku for a very, very long time. They created this PR review feature. If you used it, like, you open a PR, Heroku picks it up, oh, you need a new environment to preview your changes. Here it is, job done. Very, very easy. And you can do the same thing for any other infrastructure. Just need to code a little bit around it. And in one case, you could have a PR environment, for example, open it up, spin some infrastructure, maybe a Kubernetes cluster, maybe something else, with infrastructure as code. Again, very easy, very reproducible. Tear it down when it's over, or in my case, I'm just spinning it up and tearing it down after I have run my tests. I mean, you're not in Victor's talk, but he's got a session, video on YouTube on his DevOps toolkit channel about these kind of ephemeral environments. I thought it was pretty good. I've linked it here. But essentially, actually, let me show you the pipeline. But essentially, the idea is that, like, even something like creating clusters can only take a few minutes if you're using a tool like, for example, DigitalOcean, Civo. They just pride themselves on being faster and faster. It's not anymore like a 20, 30-minute job. So you can reasonably think about it as part of a testing flow, normal testing flow, which means that you're not polluting your staging, testing environments with a bunch of potentially incompatible versions of software. And yeah, the way it really works is essentially you just write your, let me just find it, it's my application, yeah. So you're just writing your workflow. Again, these are all individual jobs. They execute in each individual environment. So once I've built my Docker images, I can create my cluster, and then I can deploy it, and then ultimately I can tear it down after running some external tests. And that's running exactly the same Terraform that you need for production, for any other environments, with very little changes required. And that's possible if you're using like infrastructure as code tools. It's quite cool. So yeah, one other thing you want to think about is going beyond, right? You may be sitting in a hotel or in some neighborhood, but maybe you want to see something else beyond it. Maybe there is areas you haven't thought about exploring. And the same as with your pipelines. Sometimes you want to go to different areas, different projects, integrate with them, see how they all work. A common example is, for example, if you have a library that you're pushing, for example, to Artifactory or Cloudsmith registry, you want to notify those consumers of that library. Hey, I pushed this library, maybe you want to rerun the tests against this version. So again, helps this in your kind of still not using the same kind of monorepo approach. Sure, you could, but you don't need to. Recurrent jobs, thinking like tests of the entire environment. of the entire kind of platform that you're building on a periodic basis, maybe hourly, maybe nightly, maybe daily. You could do stuff like that. Dependencies I mentioned, and provisioning we saw. Thinking about how those pipelines can work together so that it gives you a nice representable view. And for that, like ultimately, you just need to make API calls from pipelines to do that. And I have my example here, for example. I have it, yeah, again, in my project here, I've basically have a job that runs external tests that hits a CircleCI API. And again, it's just a curl command you're throwing in there. You can pass in the right tokens, you can pass in the right things that you've created, and a single API call, again, you need APIs for everything, will allow you to trigger a new pipeline. And that's what happens, for example, here. Do something with my image. And in Circle, the way it works is usually you have these kind of pipeline parameters that you can configure with. So for example, image name. So I've pushed a new Docker image to the repository, so I want to do something with it. But again, if it's just a normal kind of commit flow, maybe we don't want to do it. And you can decide how you're going to trigger these workflows depending on these parameters. Because like by default, you're just going to be pushing a commit without anything set. But if you do set anything, you can then drive this a bit more in a bit more specific way. So do something with my image. I'm just passing the image name in this case. A partner of this is like if you want to circle back, pun intended, if you want to split tests and product, get the result of the test back, you can have the tests themselves call back to the original pipeline, which waits suspended. Kind of avoids polling, avoids running your kind of jobs in perpetuity, because you can just have we have this approval jobs which allow you to just wait until something is ready to be approved, and only when you kind of hit that, you can continue. You can leverage these kind of things. And again, this is something that's quite common for a lot of tools as well. They will have things like that built in. And yeah, I've got a blog post about this as well if you want to read through this. So yeah, I mean, in conclusion, we kind of showed you a couple of different patterns. Same as with travel. To get the most out of a new destination, you want to go beyond the usual suspects that are covered in a travel guidebook and make something for yourself. Ask the experts, who might be your CI/CD engineers, DevOps team, or your friends or forum people in a specific city. Hey, what do you think you should do? That's a cool approach. Usually in CI/CD anyway, it starts with the API, going outside of the usual areas and build something on top of it. And that will allow you to have greater control over your platforms, greater control over your tools, and ultimately more success. Got any questions? I can take them now. I've also got this form here. If you can get some CircleCI swag, I can send you some t-shirts. Want to get slides, can send them to as well. Or if you have any feedback, please, you can use that as well. But with that, I will just take any questions if we have them.
Amazing. Round of applause.
Thank you.
If you're too lazy to type, I still can run around. Just raise your hand, I will see you. Oh, okay, we have 2 questions so far. Do you have an example for bad usage of CI/CD tools?
Ooh, bad usage. Just look at my commit history. It usually boils down to inefficiencies, right? If you have a CI/CD tool, you're using too big resources, incompatible tooling, for example. If you want to build an Android application and you use like a virtual machine image that's tailored to iOS, like a Mac VM, and install like tooling on that as opposed to using something that's kind of tailored to that particular platform. So inefficiencies are usually that.
All right. The next question is, what is the most interesting thing you've seen in a CI/CD pipeline?
Oh, yeah. I mentioned the one that's one earlier, which is basically just driving everything through kind of chat. So you have a ton of applications that you can build, variations as well. So you have a bunch of, again, this is a mobile shop that I talked to, a bunch of different platforms, stores, versions for testing for different regions, and you can just get specific version for testing, specific build using just a chat command, and any QA member can do that. Anyone can do that. The other one is, just doing cool stuff with hardware, for example, because hardware testing is expensive, so you want to really create these kind of dynamic evaluation. When the pipeline starts, I want to do some evaluation, seeing, hey, are my tests actually good to run now? Or am I going to just waste a ton of resources and power and equipment on something that's going to fail? So you can drive these, again, using the APIs, using these more advanced orchestrations.
Thank you. Last but not least, in a team, who should be the owner of the CI/CD pipeline?
Everyone. No.
You. And you.
Your owner, yeah. No. Whoever wants to should obviously be allowed to do the most with it, because obviously they are going to be the more involved. What we see with folks who use Circle, for example, we see usually some kind of champions emerge who are either parts of DevOps teams, who are kind of responsible for multiple pipelines, multiple projects, helping different teams build and maintain their pipelines and kind of building the tooling around it, integrations. That's a kind of good one, but ultimately it depends whether you want them to also own the actual pipelines, or you want individual application developers to own their own pipelines. And again, in each application, you might have someone who's more inclined. Usually it's good to have more than one person, because bus factor, you want to have redundancy in case of holidays, in case of accidents. But yeah, it's complicated. I can talk about this all day. You can catch me outside.
That's a code word for catching you and over a drink discussing it. Okay, very last question. Guys, please bear with me for a couple of minutes after the talk. I have some infos for you, which I'm sure you want to hear. How long should a CI/CD pipeline take maximum?
It very much depends. On this one, we actually re-release this thing called State of Software Delivery, which is basically looking at all the pipelines that are run on our platform. There's like millions and millions of them, like 15 million over the month of September. We kind of aim for like a 10-minute gold standard mark for like a pipeline that's giving you enough feedback for testing, giving you enough speed to kind of not be blocked. But again, if you have some expensive tests, if you have some long-running tests, maybe you can put them in a asynchronous pipeline, maybe schedule it nightly, hourly, whatever, and run it outside of the main kind of development loop. But if you have like a development, build, test, deploy, on a commit, you want to do it within 10-ish minutes usually.
All right, thank you very much for your answers. Give a warm hand of applause to Zan.
Thank you.